Aloha, this is Didan Kamathi with Freedom Now agenda for the Saturday, September 24th, with a live interview with Mahdi Darisi, the last alternative journalist in Libya. He has researched and unmasked the web of lies that were the rationale for the U.S.-led NATO invasion. This AFRICOM's first adventure into Africa will surely spawn so-called humanitarian wars, that's to say, humanitarian wars in the Sudan, Zimbabwe, among other imperialist nations. The role of the National Endowment for Democracy and other non-profit NGOs was a Trojan horse, psychological war used for the recolonization of Africa. Sister Cynthia McKinney and Donna Barr will join us in this discussion. So stay tuned, tell a friend, and remember, tonight's program can be reheard for the next 2 months at kpfk.org under audio archives. Scroll to Freedom Now to hear this program as well as prior programs. And as always, we stand ready for the revolution. We have the answers to all of your problems. War, war, war. We will follow with a clip from 4-star U.S. Army General Wesley Clark, former Supreme Allied Commander of Europe for NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
The Russian Premier also said NATO has effectively joined one of the warring sides in the conflict, and more responsible action should be taken instead.
The coalition said destroying Gaddafi was not their goal. Then why bomb his palaces? Now some officials have claimed that eliminating him was in fact their goal. Who gave them that right? Did he have a fair trial? Returning to the no-fly zone, the bombings are destroying the country's entire infrastructure. When the so-called civilized world uses all its military power against a small country, destroying what's been created by generations.
Here he added, there are several other parts of the region in the Middle East and North Africa which is facing pretty much civil war situations, but which the West is either ignoring or not really paying the same amount of attention to. Now, I've been speaking to military analysts here in Brussels, and they confirm that ground troops are already in operation in Libya. This is not being covered by the media in the European Union, but troops are already in operation, and they are pushing forward in Libya with Colonel Gaddafi as the target.
Daniel Bushell live there in Brussels.
Well, more speculation has been raised on the reasons for NATO's intervention in Libya. And as RT's Laura Emmett reports, the organisation may have been trying to prevent Gaddafi from burying the American buck.
Some are convinced intervention in Libya is all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold, a true sharing of the wealth.
It's one of these things that you have to plan almost in secret. because as soon as you say you're going to change over from the dollar to something else, you're going to be targeted. There were two conferences on this, one in 96 and another one in the year 2000, called the World Mataba Conference, organized by Gaddafi. And everybody was interested, and I think most countries in Africa were keen.
Gaddafi didn't give up. In the months leading up to the military intervention, he called on African and Muslim nations to join together to create this new currency that would rival the dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks. So yes, that would certainly be something that would cause his immediate dismissal and the need for other reasons to be brought forth for removing him from power.
It's happened before. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraqi oil would be traded in euros, not dollars. Sanctions and an invasion followed. Some say because the Americans were desperate to prevent OPEC from transferring oil trading in all its member countries to the euro.
The UK's gold is kept here in a secure vault somewhere in the depths of the Bank of England. As in most developed countries, there's not enough to go around. But that's not the case in places like Libya and many of the Gulf states. A gold dinar would have given oil-rich African and Middle Eastern countries the power to turn around to their energy-hungry customers and say, sorry, the price has gone up and we want gold. Some say the US and its NATO allies literally couldn't afford to let that happen. Laura Emmett, RT, London.
Yeah, war. We'd like to welcome to Southern California our prior guest, Don DeBar from WBIX in New York, former Congresswoman, Green Party presidential candidate, and in my opinion, the most revolutionary, progressive congressperson in the history of the United States, former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and Mahdi. Welcome to KPFK and Freedom Now.
Well, thank you so much, Devon, for having us on again, and it is really a pleasure for me to be on with Mahdi Nazemroaya, who was among the very last of the alternative independent journalists to leave Libya. And this young man, besides just being absolutely courageous and valiant, is passionate and eloquent. And I guess I should say he's eloquent in his passion. And he has so much information, and that's what we are lacking now that he and the others who were there with him are no longer there. We are constantly bombarded by the CNN and the Fox and all of them, including the New York Times and, the Washington Post, but we're not getting the story. Mahdi will tell us a bit of the story that is the truth tonight.
Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Thank you for having me. Alaikum salam.
In terms of this notion, Libya and the Big Lie, using...
Can I ask Mahdi to speak up a little bit because I can't hear him very well?
Yeah, can you hear me better now?
Yes, that's much better.
This notion of Libya and the Big Lie, using human rights organizations to launch war, can you elaborate upon that?
All right. Before I do, I want to thank Cynthia. I'm really humbled by what she said and by her support. And I want to say one other thing. You played General Clark's statement. Well, this shows that there was a premeditated objective of attacking Libya. So legally, you need actus reus, you need an act, and you need motivation, and there's a crime right there. So what is happening in Libya is criminal, because they already had the intention of attacking Libya, And you heard it from General Clark, who's the Supreme Commander of NATO. So everything else it means is a pretext. So we should be very clear about that. Doesn't matter what they say: human rights, women's rights, poverty, democracy. These are all pretexts for their barbaric war of aggression against Libya and